Welcome back to the Wake Up Bright podcast with me, April Lauren. I'm so excited about today's episode. Today, we are talking to my running coach. She recently coached me on my running form. I had a running assessment done, and we talk about it a little in this episode, but mostly I'll be sharing that on my YouTube channel. I met Jho first at a expo that she was doing at a DECA event, and then I met her again in one of my yoga classes. Jho is a UE SCA certified running coach located here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I live. And she's an entrepreneur, sharing her love of running with everyone and building community along the way. She created a local running collective called Running Wild. And for that, there is no charge. She's got quite a little group that meets twice a week. And it's just a group of people who run or walk and run and enjoy being outside and moving together. I love it. And I really am so grateful for her skill set and what she's chosen to do professionally, as it has greatly benefited me. And I can't wait to welcome her and have her share a little of her story and a little of her insight. So without further ado, let's get started. Hey, Jho, welcome to my podcast.
Hi, April. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to get to share a little bit of your story and to talk about running with you in this podcast episode. So I thought it would be really cool to have you on the podcast as a couple of things. I think you're delightful. And I remember meeting you. So you were working for Fleet Feet, which is a running shoe store, but they also do like running programs and things. And then I met you again, and I didn't really put it together that you were you from there doing something new until I think you said something and then it just clicked. And I'm like, oh, yes, I know you. Yeah. Now I know you twice. So you have transitioned and you are a running coach, which I guess you were a running coach before when you were with Fleet Feet too, right?
Yeah, so I was the training program manager. At that time, I was hired on as the coordinator, eventually ended up being the manager, but was working as the running coach as well. It was actually the first time that Fleet Feet had here in Fayetteville that they had training programs. So I kind of started off there.
Can you tell me a little bit about where your journey with running started?
Whenever I started sports in general, was pretty late in life. Like I feel, or at least to me, it felt kind of late. I grew up with hearing a lot about how my friends, they did like the tiny tots soccer, or they did like, they tried out baseball, they tried out softball and all this stuff. I didn't actually start sports or really running until my 8th grade year. So in middle school. And it was through a lot of convincing to my mom, because in my culture and in the household that I was at, it was like looked down upon to be a girl and to be playing sports. So my brothers were allowed to play sports, but I wasn't. And so it was very like important for me to, once we got out of that situation, my family did, to pursue all the sports I possibly could. So I started with soccer. And in soccer, you did some running, but running was actually seen as a more of a punishment. Like if you showed up late to practice, if you, you missed a goal, or whatever the coach kind of assigns as like, this isn't, it was more, running was just seen more as a punishment. And so we would do it at the end of our, we would do sprints at the end of our practices and stuff like that. So in that sense, that's where running kind of started for me. It was kind of in this more punishment style. And then I entered into high school and I did cross country, like for the team. I did soccer, I did track, I did tennis. So in all of those, there was a lot of running. And then went into college and I did some more running. I ran college cross country and then did tennis in college also. And then that's kind of where, we're 4 years past that, I believe, kind of where running has brought me to now. So really like the time I started running, a bit different than when I started enjoying running, which was, I'd say probably about college time frame is really when I realized my love for running. And yeah.
That's awesome that you say love for running, because kind of what I was going to say and I didn't is the first time I met you, I didn't feel any, I think I talked to you a little bit about running, but in my mind, at least when I look back on it, and it wasn't just with you, it was more like anytime I mentioned running to anyone, it would be like apologetic and still for like a future version of myself. And you made me feel so comfortable. You're like, we have a running club and some people walk, and like some people walk and they run. Like you made it very, very approachable and made me feel very comfortable. So when I first met Jho, it was when I did my first Deca Strong. So this was December 5th of 2021. So almost a year ago. Which I didn't realize it had been that long until.
Yeah, I didn't realize until just now.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But so going back, I had a couple of questions, and I'm going to circle back to that one. Anything you don't feel comfortable talking about, you can always just be like, next, whatever you would like to say.
Right.
You were talking about how you were later in life, but you still meant adolescence. About how old were you though when you started playing sports?
So if I was in eighth grade, how old are middle schoolers?
Like 14, maybe?
Grade? 14, yeah. I'd say 14 is when that was my first time I tried out for the soccer team, made the soccer team. That was the first time that I was actually participating in sports. And then before that, it was maybe sometimes playing, outside kickball or basketball, but my role was mainly, and it was explicitly said, my role was inside the house.
So I don't know a lot. I guess I think sometimes we paint stories for people, and I felt kind of ashamed that maybe I painted one for you, like not like an in-depth story, but you saying that makes me realize that I really have no idea like anything about your background or your family. When you say culture, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
For sure. So I grew up in a Mexican household. Both my mom and my dad are Mexican. And we were all born, myself and my siblings were born in Raleigh, North Carolina. But just that culture that specifically my dad, who we did end up leaving at a very young age, but we spent most of our time living with my stepdad, who is also Mexican. That just kind of transpired through my early childhood in the sense that culturally I was different than my brothers in terms of my role was inside the household, and they were the ones participating in youth soccer. They were the ones encouraged to pursue those passions, which I think I've listened to a lot more recently now in my adulthood, and realized that it also is seen not just maybe in Mexican culture, but seen where girls aren't encouraged, whereas like boys are encouraged to do the sport for fun. And I think that for me just really stuck out as I grew up, and then that's why there was so much passion behind pursuing as many things as many sports as I could do once we were out of that situation.
Thank you for sharing more. I know that can be hard to talk about. So when you started running, you started mostly with like soccer. I feel like, so I grew up kind of all over, but soccer was never really something wherever I lived that lots of people did. I wasn't until I was beyond college, I think, the first time I played. And I feel like if I would have started when I was young, it's like the sport I was naturally best at. Like I'm not good, but like I picked up and I was able to do like probably the best, like even better.
Right.
So I always played like, I'm like, well, softball's like my thing. Like I'm too short for basketball. Right. Like, but I loved basketball. I used to be like taller than everybody. And then all of a sudden everybody passed me. And so I'm like, well, obviously basketball's not my thing. Like
Yeah.
I'm like 5'1.5". So not basketball.
Right. I'm on the same boat.
So was soccer the one that you kind of, before running, you kind of held on to the most, or which sports did you play?
So I started with soccer, and that was just the sport it was actually very common in the small town I grew up in. It was kind of soccer, basketball, and football, I'd say. And so I picked soccer. And then when I went into high school, I stuck with soccer. I started tennis. It was the first time I ever picked up a tennis racket. I started running cross country. First time I ever was like, I'm going to do running for a full practice for fun. And then I also started doing track. Same with college. I stuck with tennis and I stuck with cross country.
So all together, you've been running for about 10 years. What was it like running in college for you?
Oh man, it was wonderful. I'd say definitely a real highlight in my life altogether. It was just the way that cross country got introduced to my college. I actually went to college for tennis, and it was Division 3. Got recruited to play there. It wasn't until my junior year, so 2 years into college, NCAA reinstated cross country as a sport in my university. So once I realized, and once that kind of hit the news and all of that, I immediately called my coach, who I let know. I was like, I want to do cross country. And he was like, I knew you would be the first person to call. I am actually going to be coaching the new cross country team. And so we had this hour-long conversation, and it was like, it must have been just off hours. But he answered the phone. We talked about cross country and running, and just were super excited about, the possibility of this happening and the opportunities that we were going to have running, in college. So it was a really cool experience. The team itself was awesome. It was a brand new team, brand new coach. I felt super, super grateful to have experienced those 2 years. And I wish I would have had 2 more years of running.
That's awesome. That's really cool. What did you major in when you were in school?
I majored in biology and minored in psychology. Going into college, I've always been interested in science, always been interested in psychology. And originally, I went in as a pre-med student. My goal was to work as a pediatrician, to work with kids, did all the internships. I did the shadowing my first 2 years of college. And then probably around my junior year, also very developmental time for me, realized that that wasn't going to be what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I still stuck with biology. I did enjoy it. So I stuck with it, minored in psychology.
So you have a love for and a passion for running. Can you tell me, and it's okay if it's hard to put into words, but can you tell me why, and like, what is your why for running? So 2 questions. Why do you love running, and why do you run?
So I'll try to best put it into words, because I think it's really hard to articulate the feelings. And I think it kind of gets said over and over again, but I think the reason that it does is because it rings so true for many of us that do find joy in running. And but I think for me, my why is because I almost said because I can, but I mean that in the way that I want to do this for a really long time. I want to continue running for a really long time, and I want to find ways where I can continue running without there being pain, without there being just being able to find ways to where I can continue doing it and continue being as happy as I am running. It really has brought so much feeling of community for me. And I know it's weird to say because running is pretty individualistic. You're going out there by yourself. You're you're not necessarily like on a soccer team, right? You're not necessarily on like a tennis team. Tennis is actually a bad analogy because you do go out in singles and, you're playing the match by yourself. But in the sense that, running is you're doing it as an individual, but it brings such a community because in any place that I have gone, and I've moved quite a bit because of my childhood, and I've moved quite a bit just in general. But any place that I've ended up in, running has been such a connector, I guess. I've been able to connect with so many different people just by mentioning that I enjoy running, or whatever that looks like. I've been able to find just different communities and pockets of people, and it's been such a grounder for me. So if it's a new place, if it's a new thing that I'm trying out, just bringing up the conversation of running has been such a grounder for me.
I love that. I was scribbling down some notes because I feel like there's layers, and I don't want to skip layers, but then I also kind of do, because you'll say something and I'm like, let's talk about that.
Right.
So I love that you brought up community with running, and I want to circle towards that. Before I do, I think running because you can, I think it's a really interesting and cool thing. And maybe it kind of works. And if I'm putting words in your mouth or in your story, you can stop me at any time. But you said that, growing up, running was a form of punishment, like you're late, run, almost like you shouldn't enjoy it. Like it should be pain. And I feel like for most people, running is pain. And it's the way that we think or conceptualize running. I think maybe as a culture, or maybe there's lots of cultures that do. I know that there's some that don't, but where when we run like the hardest and fastest that we possibly can. And it's just like a force. And it isn't always that enjoyable, but I love, like, as I did my 5K training, it's the first time. So I'm really quite heavy now, like very heavy. And there's been times in my life where I've ran and I wasn't heavy at all. And I've always not enjoyed running unless I'm very angry. And then I would love it because it would get those feelings out.
Right.
And then doing the 5K training, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go as slow as I need to go. And I'm just going to kind of move along. And it almost became meditative, like yoga. It would kind of clear my mind as I was just thinking about like breathing, or thinking about, I think I told you, I recently asked Joe if she would do an analysis of like my running form and like point out things. So she did that. And I was talking to her, and I was like, yeah. So when I first started, in my head, I'd be like, switch, 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 switch. And it was so I didn't like, I know my left to right side's uneven, and just walking, I spend more time on one of my sides. And so I was trying to keep that even. And that, saying that to myself became like, I don't know, it just became like this trance, like where I'm like in like a weird space where I feel free. And I was also able to do something that I didn't know I could do until I did it, which is run and breathe at the same time and feel good just running, even though it's slow. So people might be like, nah, that's not running. But to me, it is. And I didn't think I could, and I did. And just being able to do that. So when you say because I can, that's kind of what I hear.
Yeah.
And that it is. And go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to cut you off.
You didn't.
No, I think you put it in a lot more of a beautiful way than I was able to. But yeah, I think that being able to do it because you can, and that I think, first of all, it doesn't matter what speed you're going at, right? Like if you're moving at a faster pace than walking, that's legitimately by definition running. And so it doesn't matter how fast or slow. And I think one of the like how do you decide if you should start running, right? And I think that kind of, for me, what it sounded like goes into just being able to do it because it feels good for you, right? That there is no necessarily qualifying factor. If it feels good for you, if you're looking for a community, if you're looking for a change of pace, no pun intended, if you're, for fitness or for fun, there doesn't need to be a qualifying factor. You don't need to justify it for anyone else other than you feel like doing it, you can do it, and just go out and have fun doing it. The punishment piece to it too, I think a lot of athletes can kind of relate to this, maybe especially like the sprinting portion of it, right? Where I specifically remember doing, I think even in gym class, it was like the cone test or the speed test, the beep test, that's what it was called. And so you would get put on a starting line, and then the literally it was a radio, and you put a CD in there and it would just beep, and you'd have to like beat the beep basically. So even that like environment, right? Like who's having fun in that situation? No one is. Everyone's pretty stressed out, I think. And so this idea that's put in context with running of like it's a punishment, a little bit of like shame, a little bit of all these things associated with it, kind of negative connotations with it. And I think that maybe that's why a lot of times we don't find our joy for running or our love for running until a little bit later, when it's in a little bit of a different environment and you realize that you can do it just for fun and it doesn't have to be in a specific way.
I love that. You said that like I worded it. I don't remember what your phrasing was, but I love that when I talked to you about running, both the first time and then it was several months later, because it was like within the past 3 months or so that you came to one of my yoga classes for a long time after. And so it had been several months between the two. And both times, like your love for running radiated. Like, because I think I mentioned, you said that you were a runner, and then I mentioned that I was like struggling through my couch to 5K. And but your love comes through when you talk about it. And I love that you ran in college, that you have the history with running that you do, and yet it didn't feel like there was any. And I feel like this is often with people who love fitness, or no judgment coming. Like it wasn't like you were like, ooh, you sure you want to run? That's kind of the fear. I think everyone, especially if you struggle with weight, and I'm not saying if you are overweight, you should run, or obese, you should run. That's not what I'm saying. I think you should talk to your medical professionals and to a professional first. So just want to clear that out. But at the same time, I feel like if there is a desire in you to do something, exploring that is not bad. And even when we start to explore it, there's a fear that people who do it are going to, like, especially if they're a professional or in a professional capacity, there's going to be like some judgment or some harshness. And I love that from you, all I got was like love, like the love of running and running in the way that I could. Love that I can feel your passion and your love for running just when talking to you. So, with that, you have built a community. You talked a lot about finding community and there being a community with running, but you have built community in running here locally. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. So that's kind of been my pride and joy. And every time I think about it, it puts me in a really emotional spot. And I know that sounds like super cheesy. But it really does, just because it does mean the absolute world to me to be able to just run with the community, to be able to be in this position where people are excited to show up to Run Club, and to be able to look forward to hanging out with such a great group of people, such a great diverse group of people. And not everyone loves running. People are just, a lot of people's like motivation is just to hang out with the people that do go, and whether that's walking or whether that's running, people are just excited to be there. And so to be in that space, and to have played a part in that just means the absolute world to me. And if you would have told me, I don't know, even a year ago that this was going to be what, my Tuesdays and Saturdays look like, that there was going to be a run club, that, we were going to be meeting together, that I was going to be working with clients, I would have just been like, that sounds really awesome. But I would have laughed a little and been like, wow, I feel super, super blessed, super grateful. I'm just really looking forward to how many other things we can do and how much more we can grow as a community.
How did it come to be? Like, how did you go from, I know where you worked previously, there was a run club and you talked about that run club, but how did you go from that to creating Running Wild and building it? Because you have a pretty solid group that come every week, Tuesdays and on Saturdays. Where did like the inspiration come? How did you start?
There was a training program that I started. Eventually, I just realized that this was something that I wanted. I felt kind of led to start this group. It's because of the individuals that made the group. We were doing this training program. There were 6 specific individuals. I remember like thinking that this is the group that I want to start this run club with. And I never had any plans to start a run club. It was just that group. We were training for a 5K. I think we had maybe 4 to 6 weeks to train. And about halfway through, I don't want us to stop doing what we're doing. And I don't want to see this group like just not meet anymore. If that makes sense. Like I just couldn't visualize not meeting with this group and having us all together.
You had a group of people and you guys were collectively training for a 5K. And as you were training for that 5K, you built relationships and you built community, and you didn't want that community to disappear after the race, which would happen. Like that's very common. And so that's kind of where the idea to actually have like we're going to continue and have a running club that meets 2 times a week. That's where it came from.
Right. Exactly. I can't see this group dissipating or not, meeting up after our race together. So that's kind of where Running Wild Collective came from, was those starting 6 individuals that did stay with me, with us as a group. And then that's kind of how that, yeah. I think being passionate about fitness, at least my experience and the people that I choose to surround myself with, are going to be very inviting towards the fitness, right? Towards running, towards whatever endeavor that you're choosing to go with. Very inviting, very excited for you to be part of the community, right? I like always think about, I see these like running memes all the time where it's like you see someone running on, the 12 p.m. peak summer in the South, right? And I can't help but be like, yeah, like,
Oh my gosh. I have gotten doing my couch to 5K training. There have been so many times that I've been out and I'm like dying, and you'll have like a random person beep their horn and be like, way to go.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
exactly.
I need it. So it gives me like wind to myself, and it also makes me mortified because I know I'm like struggling, and I'm like, they know I needed that, but I did need it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I love that about being a community in itself. And I'm going to transition a little bit here, but I think it's really true. And I don't know if I would have understood the scope of the community behind running if I didn't at some point when I was walking. And this is like last summer. So like summer 2021, not summer 2022. I started listening to not books on tape, but like Audible. I guess it's books on tape. But I started listening to like ultra marathoners. You also have a passion for reading books. about
Yes,
running. Where did
for
that
sure.
come from?
So I've been a bookworm since the very beginning, since I could read. My first book was Harry Potter. My first chapter book was Harry Potter. And it's just been, especially, in early childhood, it was my escape. It was my place to explore. I could adventure so many different, time frames, so many different locations. So it was just my escape. I love reading. And I was in like the battle of the books. I was, working for those pizza coupons, free pizza coupons from Pizza
I did
Hut.
that too. I think it was like Accelerated Reader or something. Was the
Yes,
program. I
exactly.
read Moby Dick in sixth grade for the points. It was worth like 64 points or something. I was
That's
very serious
awesome.
about those points.
Right, absolutely, as you should be. But yeah, so running has been like a passion of mine also since the very beginning. And it really running or reading about running kind of became a thing once my cross country coach in college first suggested reading. What was his first? Eat and Run by Scott Jurek, who's also big time ultramarathon runner, vegan runner, vegan diet. So super cool. I read that book and I just loved it. I am not vegan, but I just loved how he wrote about it. I loved the way that he talked about running in his book. And that was my very first like running book, my introduction to running. And I continued reading running books thereafter, and I've really enjoyed it. I'm not a big nonfiction person, or at least I wouldn't have said I was a big nonfiction person up until then. And then once I read that first book, it's been like any running book related. More recently, anything sports related has become just my bread and butter. In my more of an escape for me in just digesting as much information about how these people think and how they go about their running journey. Super interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the first books that I listened to, you said Scott Jurek, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he wrote a book with his girlfriend. I think maybe
Yeah, North.
North. Yeah. Oh, very cool. So that was the first one I think I listened to.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then,
great audiobook.
oh, it's so good. It was so good. Like, yeah. So if you're looking for books to read, it's a book called North. Um, so Into the Furnace is one that I read, and then it was Running Man. They're really good. Especially the Running Man book was really good. And that North book was really good. And then I just finished a book called Running Dangerously, and it's about a news anchor for CNN. And his daughter, so he's like middle age, and his daughter, who just started college, is like, "Hey dad, want to like train and run a marathon with me?" And so he that just sets him off on like this direction, and he ends up running like an ultra marathon. But he goes through that training with her, and like he's a very good storyteller. And it was, I remember listening to the book as I was doing my 5K training, and at one point they were running like a half marathon or something, and he was talking about how when she was growing up that he and his wife would always tell them when they would get hurt, like even if they were actually worried, they'd be like, you're fine. And so in the book, like he's like telling her, he's like, you're fine. And then he's giving the background. He's like, I'm really worried, but you're fine. And I needed to hear that at that moment. So from that point forward, I would just be like, you're fine. And it's true, because it always, whatever it is, always passes. Like,
Right.
I mean, there's of course things that if you're running, you should probably stop. But often it's not those things. It's not one of those things that's happening that's making me tempted to stop. What would you recommend to someone who is thinking about starting? What would you recommend to them?
I think finding your community. There's no shame, I think, in allowing those people to be your motivators. I think maybe in whether that's, current culture or whether fitness culture or whatever, I think that there's kind of this big push around, you get yourself out of bed, you push yourself, you be disciplined. No one else is going to do it for you type of thing. And I think there's a time and place for that, right? But I think when you're starting to do something, when you want to, you know, start a new habit or whatever that looks like, there's no shame in reaching out to people, trying to find those connections, trying to find things that make it exciting for you to do that thing. And specifically, we're talking about running. So finding that run club, finding, one other person that enjoys running and that you feel safe running with, is that a family member? Is that a friend? Is that, but finding that community, finding that space to help you get started and kind of just see where that takes you.
What if it's someone who is nowhere near ready to start running, but that's something that's always been in their mind or on their heart, and that's what they want? Like, what should they do?
In that sense, it would be definitely doing some research, finding a run coach, finding someone that can get you to identifying that goal and working towards that goal in a safe way, talking to experts, whether that's, a doctor that's going to be able to refer you to someone, whether that's a registered dietitian that's going to be able to get you somewhere, or a certified running coach, finding those people that are going to be able to help identify that goal and get you to that end goal.
First time you and I talked, I don't think I brought up running. I think I was just looking at the shoes. And I think at that point, I hadn't bought my first pair of Hokas yet. And when I had increased my walking distance and my knees were starting to hurt from walking on concrete for like several miles. And so I think I might have been asking questions like that when you brought up the run club. And I think you said that people came and they just walked, because whatever you said to me had me tempted to go as I was. I didn't, but I was tempted. And so is that true? Like sometimes you'll go to run clubs and people walk?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that is what we, especially like at our run club, we want people to, you don't have to wait until you are, at your perfect end state or what it is that you're envisioning as the perfect time for you to start. You can just show up as you are and then work towards whatever that goal looks like for you. If it's to continue walking, and walking is your form of, freedom, it's your form of exercise, it's what you enjoy doing, then great. You get to do it in a, group setting where it's safer to do most of the time, with bigger numbers, especially towards, whether that's early morning or late evening time. But if walking is your starting point and you eventually want to get to that running part, then for sure going to run clubs is going to be a great place for people like that to start.
I love what you said about finding a group and showing up as you are. I think it's so important. I mean, and just doing that helps us overcome that negative voice in our head. We're always going to have a little bit of pushback whenever you want to do something good for yourself and it's new and it's scary. It's easy to let the negative prevail in our mind, like, and it becomes that excuse. Even if it's like a perfection thing, you're like, well, I want to like be able to do this really well before I go there. That's like it's just an excuse. It's using perfectionism as an excuse. So either if it's that, or if it's maybe belittling yourself and feeling like you won't belong. And worst case scenario is you'll show up and maybe people are rude to you, but that just means that's not your group. Like, exactly. That's not, you don't want to be in that group. Even if you were where you want to be, you don't want to be around those people.
That's so true. And I think, this kind of brings up something for me. I think there was a lot of fear behind showing up for strength training for me when I first started doing strength training, because I ran a lot. But there wasn't a big push into strength training and lifting weights. So there was a lot of fear around being able to lift weights. And I pushed myself to go to a CrossFit gym, which was very scary. And I remember showing up, and this was after, I don't know, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks of convincing myself to show up to open gym to just explore what that gym looked like. And I had about 3 gyms I was going to kind of narrow it down to the one that I wanted to be a part of. And so I go to this one gym, kind of to scope it out on during their open gym. And there's just this 3 individuals who, we're good friends now. But I just remember they were finishing up their workout and they were just, yoked, and they had their shirts off and they were pushing those weights. They were, doing all the CrossFit things. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is not the place for me. And I was going to very seriously leave and be like, I'm not going to, to stick around here. And the gym owner came up to me, and he started just talking to me, talking about how they, their coaching philosophy, what their classes look like, all these things. He made it very welcoming. And so I stayed, I listened to him. And he told me, we'll have an introduction class, and just very like, didn't start off with saying it's like, oh, you see this, like, this is where you need to be, like right here, right now. Very like, which is very welcoming, very understanding, and made my CrossFit, like, introduction to CrossFit such a great time, where I very legitimately could not squat the bar as like my very first time. And it took me, working up to squatting the bar. So now I think back at that, and it's like, that was a very like scary experience. And I was very proud of myself to have stuck around, to be able to experience that community, because they were a great group of people, and they still are. They're doing great. But we moved, so I don't live there close to the gym anymore. But yeah, I think what you said is that if they are rude to you, or if let's say this gym owner, for whatever reason, wasn't welcoming and was like trying to get me to jump in on their workout right then, or whatever, I would have very immediately known that this was not a place I wanted to be at, and it wouldn't have been my gym. But that wasn't the case. And so I got to have a really cool community and learn lifting through them. So I think there's a lot to be said about I think there's a lot to be said about pushing through that uncomfortable piece of, being intimidated, and just kind of seeing where it gets you.
I love that, because it is a intimidation, a gym intimidation, and it doesn't matter what you look like. Most people feel that at some point when they're going to start a gym. I don't know if y'all remember, but I had Simply Manders, Amanda, on the podcast, and so she's like a super intense CrossFitter. Like, she might cringe that I call her super intense CrossFitter, but if you look at her, like, if you picture like what like a super awesome, intense female CrossFitter looks like, she looks like that. But she was describing when she first showed up to go to her first, like, she had decided that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to be an intense CrossFitter. And she's like, I showed up to the gym and I sat in the car the whole time. And then I think she left and she had to like come back. It's normal. Like, so wherever you are in your fitness journey, wherever you are in your weight loss journey, just know, like, those hurdles, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. Like, we all have them, and we just have to be kind to ourselves and patient and work past it. It's okay if it takes you a long time to get up the courage to go, and then you go and you don't even get out of your car. Like, just celebrate the progress, the little things that you do when you face your fears. I think that's really helpful. So I love that you shared your story about that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you offer several different things, and I don't know, do you do some of them, or would you be open to doing some of them remotely, or do they need to be in person?
No, absolutely. I want to say 90% of my clients are are virtual. So the training plans are delivered in a virtual platform, Final Surge, very user friendly. And so even the one-on-one coaching, even the running form analysis, all of that can be done virtually. Hopefully, it's become very easy to be able to interact with clients over a virtual setting because of the times.
Yeah. So we just did the virtual running assessment. So that is something that you offer. And then you want to explain like what that is, and would you recommend that for someone who's maybe just thinking about starting? Like I kind of wish I would have done it when I first started. So maybe I'm not trying to lead you.
So the running analysis or running form analysis that you and I did, it would be great for someone that just started running. I think it's also really great for someone that's in maybe a plateau and they've been training for a really long time and they want to figure out different things that they can do biomechanically to help their running form. Or it can be, just in any phase in your running journey, it can be super helpful because just having those third set of eyes to look at, to be able to kind of pinpoint, third set of qualified eyes and to be able to pinpoint what can be kind of tweaked or worked on to help your overall running form.
So you offer the running analysis, which is for someone who maybe you're just looking to start, or for me, the reason I wanted it, well, one, I found out that you offered it because we had talked, and then I think I followed you on Instagram or something. And then I peeped your website and I was like, oh, because you didn't say anything about any of the stuff. But I was like, oh, she offers these things and that would probably be really helpful for me. And then I was like, well, what I'm doing is scary enough. So I just kept doing what I was doing at the time. And then I did my 5K training, my couch to 5K. And I'm like, okay, I'm really, really slow. And I feel very comfortable slow, but I'm very bad at pushing outside of what I know I can do when I'm scared. And so I'm like, I wanted you to look at my form and help me maybe fix things that I might need to fix so that if I do go faster, I won't get hurt. And I love so maybe I'll pull it up in a second, but you're like, you're not lifting your knees. And I'm like, it scares me to lift my knees. If I run faster, if I open up, then I will. But I'm like, oh man, I don't do that because it's scary.
Yeah, for sure. What's the fear? Sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to ask questions.
I think it's just the weight. So, well, one, my left to right side was super, super unbalanced, and running even the way that I have, which is my little shuffle, has really over the course of, so I started doing the couch to 5K, I think in June. And then I just repeated weeks. If I didn't feel super comfortable going up to the next time, I just repeated that week or that day. So if it was the next day was going up, but it didn't feel good, then I would just do the previous days until I felt good. Making that isolated movement and then focusing kind of on the even timing has really balanced out my left to right side. The fear is just, I am not comfortable opening up with my weight and I just get scared. I'm trying to talk it up and make it this big thing. I'm just scared. There's not a legitimate why. I'm trying to talk myself into a good why. It's just scary for me.
Yeah. No, that doesn't have to be. I think that's legitimate enough. Being, yeah, the falling
in
forward.
In my mind, lifting my knee up higher will mean the force coming down is greater. And when I have ran faster, that's not necessarily true. So my experience has not shown that that's a valid. I'm sure it can be valid, and I'm sure it's more valid if you're not landing properly. I don't think I'm going to hurt myself by lifting up my knees is my point. I may actually hurt myself by not putting enough bend in my knee. So is that true?
Yeah. I think that's the note I mentioned in the running form. I was like, we would like to see more knee flexion so it reduces the impact that you're putting.
Do you care if we look at that? Can we look at that?
No, not at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to come to your website first. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of you are listening. So her website will be linked in show notes down below. And the website will be linked if you're watching on YouTube. Like, even though you're able to see it now, it'll be linked in the description below. So the reason I want to talk about this is I've had people ask when I was doing my couch to 5K, like, how should I get started? Like, what should I do? And the reality is, I'm completely uncomfortable answering any of those questions. And this is a great person to maybe ask some of those questions or finding someone like her. So if you wanted to like look at what she offers or maybe like message her, follow her on Instagram, you can. And then maybe find other people similar if you want someone in your local community. But these are what she offers. So she offers the one-on-one coaching, which is what she just did for me fits into this. So the one-on-one coaching is $60 an hour and it's the visual gait analysis. Did you do multiple of these? I think
I did. Yeah. Mhm.
as I'm like looking over, I'm like, I think we did almost all of these. Um, she's got a 6-month maintenance training plan. She's got a half marathon if you're working for that, and it's a monthly rate. Then a maintenance. So if you're just looking to maybe, if you were just getting started running, you've never really ran, but you're not really trying to run a 5K or anything like that, what would you put that person on?
I think definitely the maintenance plan. It's just more so geared to not necessarily training up for a race. So the reason that the 5K, 10K, and all of that's broken up into races, it's because a lot goes into race prep. So it's very specific into what type of race that you're running, and then whether that's race day preparations, fuel planning, all those things, the little things that are very important in race preparation. So the maintenance would be more so for those that are getting started, that are just kind of looking to use running as a fitness form, and not so much specifically training for a race in, say, like the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. And are all of these month to month, or do you ask people to sign up for a specific period of time?
It's month to month. So if someone wants to try the first month and just kind of see how that goes for them, and then the 2 mile or the 5K, 10K, all of that, the reason there's a range from 8 to 10 weeks, it just depends on, what their fitness level is, what their fitness base is, how long we think it'll take for them to safely train up for that race. And then that's how that monthly payment can get broken up. But I can work with any individual in terms of pricing and find something that
And you do
works
an
best for us.
initial consultation call too with people,
Hmm.
right? Yes.
Correct. Yeah. And then that one's a free 30-minute consultation, just kind of going over what their goals are, maybe finding a plan that would best fit those goals.
Yeah. So I'm not sharing this with you, and Joe didn't hop on this with me in order to like get you to get her training plans or anything.
Mhm.
And the reason I wanted to go over it is just so you're aware that this exists and that she offers it,
Mhm.
but then also that it exists. So if there's something that you want to do, there's probably a qualified professional out that can help coach you through.
Absolutely.
And you don't necessarily have to have a professional, but like what she was saying with having a qualified eye on my running form, like she's going to catch things that other people aren't. Like I could get my husband to watch me run all day long and he's not going to know what he's looking at because that's not his field. So those of you listening, I will read this out. So she's got maintenance, and this would also be like for beginners who are just maybe getting started. And so that's a month to month training where she would put in a plan, and she uses an app, she said, for that. Then if you're in the military and you're working on improving your ACFT time, she's got a plan in place for that. Then she's got a 5K or a 10K, then a half marathon training, and then like a 6-month maintenance training plan. And then the one-on-one coaching, which is what I did, which was the visual gait analysis and the biomechanical assessment. And then with that, she's given me suggested like movements and things to do as well. So,
In terms of what you said earlier about finding, I think it's super important to kind of vet out your running coach and finding someone. A lot of times, running coaches will have, um, one-on-one free consultations before you even start a training plan with them. The big difference with Googling a training plan, right? Like, whether that's couch to like 5K, couch to like half marathon or whatever, is that working with a coach, they're going to be able to individualize a training plan for you. So kind of like what you mentioned about, it's like, oh, I didn't feel good about moving on to the next day, so I repeated a day. That's the conversation that you would be having with your coach, and they would be able to kind of more tailor what it is that you're working towards, again, in a safe way, and kind of be that voice for you. So definitely vetting out the coach, and what your coaching style is, what your learning style is, what what feels like, what feels comfortable.
Can you talk about like what that means and what the credential is?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll have your very kind of more well-known, or maybe not so much well-known, but just the common ones you hear are RCA, which is road runners, something. I can't remember the rest of it. Our RCA is a big one. You'll have your USATF. That one's kind of known to be more of your, if you're going to be working in a high school setting or even a college setting, it's kind of more known for that. And then you have your UESCA, which is the one that I'm certified through. And you'll have other ones too, which I'm not super familiar with. But there is a difference between a certified running coach and then someone that's a running coach, just because they went through that specific certification process. And each one of those, whether that's RRCA, USATF, or UESCA, they all have kind of their own criteria to receive the credentials. And they and that information can also be found. And so it does make a difference in terms of what it is that the running coach learned, I guess. But that's just really the difference between a certified running coach and then a person that coaches running. They went through that certification process. And a lot of times you'll see, running coaches have like CPT, like the personal trainer certification, or the one that I'm currently finishing up is certified strength and conditioning coach. And that one's going to be through the NSAF, I believe. So just kind of when vetting coaches or running coaches specifically, you'll see that they have specific certifications. And then that will kind of, I guess, cue you into what it is that they're more experienced in, or what they're more interested in, what they can be more helpful in. Just something to look at. But yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a difference. And I mean, even with personal training, like there's different people who are different programs that you can do to get a personal training certification. There's also people, so there's online programs that you can do like NASM, which is very like people will trust it. You can get a job at most fitness places if you have a NASM or an ACE certification. But then you have people who go to school and major in exercise science, and they have a little bit more backing, or they might not have majored in exercise science, but something related, and that qualifies them to get a different type of personal training certification. So it depends on what level you're wanting. And I don't think that like the highest level, like you don't necessarily need somebody with a master's to help you have a good workout in the gym, a good safe workout. Like you don't necessarily need that. And you don't necessarily need a run coach with like a ton of certifications. I didn't even know that was a thing, but maybe be skeptical of people who haven't put in any time to have any credentials or like guidance in what they're looking at, and they just wing it. I mean, maybe not be skeptical, but just know that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just kind of looking at who it is that you're going to be working with. And then on top of that too, I think personality is a big one, right? Just who is this person that you're going to be working with and that you're going to be trusting to help you reach your goal, and working together as a team, right? So yeah, I think the one-on-one consultations, definitely great use. Make good use of those.
Yeah, I love that.
So basically, we started off with a more biomechanical assessment. So what that looks like is just looking at more static and dynamic exercises. So for this one specifically, for running specifically, I like to do the static one first, and then kind of follow with some dynamic exercises, which look at hip flexors, looking at strength and flexibility in different areas throughout, and that can help assess any weaknesses or any things that we can work on. After doing the static and dynamic biomechanical assessment, after that, we looked at the running form. All of these are video, there's pictures, and basically just looking at what that running form looks like, kind of specifics that I'm looking: alignment of posture, hip angle, arm swing, vertical oscillation, like movement of the head, foot strike pattern, just a whole bunch of different things, just to see if there's altogether what that looks like, and then kind of breaking it down to see if there's anything that can be adjusted or worked on.
Love it. Thank you. So as I shared, she and I are going to look at it a little bit more in depth, and I might include pieces of that like in a separate video. It's really interesting, and I think it's quite helpful for me. And I wish I would have done it when I first started. If you have flirted with the idea of running, even if you are just starting out and you're going to be walking, and even if you're only going to be walking a short distance, if it's within your scope and something that you can afford to do and that you're comfortable doing, I think reaching out is so helpful. And with running clubs and things, often if they're in the community, there's so many different activities for you to go and just be part of a community. And I want to close this with Jho by asking you, Jho, what advice do you have for someone who wants to get started? Like encouragement, motivation.
Encouragement or motivation. I think something that has been super helpful for me, I don't know if anyone else has heard of or follows Elise Myers on Instagram, but something that she talks about a lot is do things scared. That there's never really, at least I have not yet, gone into something new and not been scared. If you're wanting to start, if you have that will, there's a way, and it doesn't have to be the same way that everyone else does it, but just lean into it, do it scared, and find the people that are going to be supportive of what it is that you want to do that makes you happy.
I love that. Thanks so much, Jho. And thanks for sharing a little of your story with us. And we'll see you next time.
See you. Thank you so much, April.
I am so grateful for Jho for sharing her passion and her love for running with me. And I'm so happy that she was able to come on here and share a little bit with you as well. She's such a kind, uplifting soul, and I'm grateful for her. Can't wait to have her on here again. If you want to look into her running plans, you can find her on Instagram at Your Favorite Cup of Jho, JHO, or by seeing the show notes below. I am so grateful for you for listening to our podcast today. I hope you enjoyed. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to leave a comment if you have any questions, or you can always shoot me a message on Instagram at Wake Up Bright. And to close this podcast, I just want to reiterate something Jho said. She said something to the effect of just do it scared. And I love that, because no matter what it is, I feel like when I start moving in the direction, it becomes less scary with every step that I take, no matter what it is. And I know I'm great at creating mountains at nothing, and that movement, creating that momentum, helps me not only start forward to climb up these mountains that I've created, but often those mountains dissipate. And I realized that there wasn't anything to be scared of in the first place. And that's not always going to be true, but I think it so often is. And I am rooting for you on whatever journey you are undertaking. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to talking to you next time.